Hello everybody, and welcome to this evening's meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee on Wednesday the 31st of March. I'd like to, before I start, do the introductions. I'm Michael Pavlovic, Chair of the committee. We have the members of the committee with one substitution. Councillor Hollier is substituting for Councillor Wan. You will see two additional officers. They are the two statutory officers, Debbie Mitchell, who's a Chief Finance Officer, and JD Berry, who's the Monitoring Officer and Director of Governance. When we ask them to speak, they will introduce themselves and give their job titles. For those of you that have watched these remote meetings in the past, we're broadcasting via Zoom, and we will be asking members to raise what they call a virtual blue hand, which is a button that they have on their screen, which I will see, though you watching at home will not. I will ask members to ask their question in the order in which they've raised their hands. If a supplementary question that is required, the member will raise a physical hand, and I will know that it's a supplementary that they're asking. I think that's about it from the remote housekeeping. There will be a break. I'll have to factor that in, hopefully after the first agenda item 4. But certainly we will be having a break for around 10 minutes at some time during the meeting. If, however, members do need a comfort break before that, please just indicate that, and we will factor in the break. So, agenda item 1, declarations of interest. Can I ask members whether they have any declaration of a personal, prejudicial or disclosable pecuniary interest? Councillor Lomas, you've raised your hand.
Thank you, Chair. I want to declare this in the interest of transparency at the outset of the meeting, given the subject matter this evening. I don't believe it's prejudicial or pecuniary interest, but I did submit a standards complaint in June 2020. That complaint was not investigated and the matter went no further.
Thank you. Thank you. Unless the monitoring officer is telling me any different, I don't believe that that is a prejudicial interest. So thank you in the interest of transparency for raising that. Agenda item 2 is the minutes. Now, the minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of January, I unfortunately wasn't able to attend, and Councillor Fisher, as Vice Chair, stepped in to chair that, and I thank him very much for doing that. I can't therefore formally propose these minutes, so I'm going to hand over to Councillor Fisher for him to move the minutes of the last meeting.
Thank you, Chair. Can I move the minutes of the meeting of the 26th of January 2021 as a true and accurate record? Do I have a seconder?
Seconded.
Thank you very much indeed. Could I see all those in favour, please show? Just general consensus. Thank you very much. Over to you, Captain.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fisher. Agenda item 3 is public participation. We have 3 public participants today, and this will work that they will be on audio only. So I will introduce each of them by turn. You will hear the audio, but you won't see a physical face. If there are any technical problems, you may hear a disembodied voice, which will be our fantastic tech team that will be working on trying to resolve any technical issues that we may have. Our first public speaker is Gwen Swinburne. Can you hear me, Gwen?
I can, Chair. Can you hear me?
Marvellous. Yes, absolutely.
Oh, fantastic.
Crystal clear.
Okay, I'll get going, shall I?
Well, let me just get my timer. You know how this works,
of course.
Gwen.
Yeah, I'm in 3 minutes.
You've got 3 minutes, and at 30 seconds, I will just give you a little indicator. So start whenever you like.
Thank you, Chair. It has been a wait, but good to see Mazars' annual audit letter finally before you. It must have been an extraordinarily hard year for the Section 151 officer and her staff, and despite the few but significant red flags, Debbie and her team deserve credit. But the fact is there are a number of disturbing markers in this letter. Clearly, the elephant in the room is my audit objection, which has resulted at this point in a serious value for money qualification. Sadly, as before with the public interest report, the Halliday procurement fiasco and the dreadful ICO data audit, it is frustrating to see multiple governance failures across the same core central departments: legal, governance, HR, democracy services, and finance. Whilst these core departments are allowed to be led as they are, we will, as we have seen for nearly a decade, see both members and citizens repeatedly failed and regular fiascos as we see currently. As Mazars will give their full report in response to my accounts objection soon, today I will focus on other matters of deep concern. I was horrified to see that for the second year in a row, Mazars raised a serious red flag about feeble password protocols. It should never have happened in the first place, but for auditors to have to raise the exact same concern 2 years in a row means that staff are clearly not taking these concerns seriously, exposing us to critical business risks. Equally concerning is the fact that 8 months into the process, Mazars has still not been provided with information on IT controls. This is unacceptable. I was disappointed to see the defensive response of management to the auditor's concerns regarding the work of valuers, and quite horrified to see tens of millions of pounds, in one case 40 million, being reported as needed changing. Chair, there is no point staff accepting they have made mistakes and commit to improvements when their track record on this, on the public interest report, on transparency obligations, on the ICO data audit, even on forward plans, actions are simply ignored with zero repercussions. Finally, Chair, something really has to change this time, and it needs to involve more than an apology. We cannot have senior staffers unaccountable and ignoring directions from regulatory bodies or from this committee. We cannot have that anymore. It has to stop, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm sure the points that you've raised in your 3 minutes will be covered within the meeting.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The second public speaker that we have is our erstwhile independent member, Mr. Andy Mendes. Andy, can you hear us?
I can. Hello there, Michael.
Marvellous. Hello. I hope you're well, Andy. You know how this works. You've got 3 minutes. Yep. Start whenever you like.
Okay. And I'll start by congratulating Debbie on keeping the finances of the Council under control in 2019-20, and especially in the current financial year, as far as I understand it. May I also commiserate with her in having to try recently to defend the indefensible. I'm sure others will pick up on this point in rather more detail. On Mazars' report, I read the same report as Gwenny. I have a slightly different take on it. First of all, I'd appreciate some more detail on their comments about IT passwords and security. It's not clear to me whether they're now satisfied or whether the situation they criticised in 2018-19 remains the same, because the sentence in the executive summary is unclear. It suggests that there's a response still expected from CYC, but then in section 3, the conclusion is that no new issues have been identified, but it repeats the issues identified in 2018-19. I'd also be interested in Mazars' view of the effectiveness of our internal audits, especially whether they think that CYC members and officers effectively follow through on the many recommendations identified therein. A particular question for the committee is, what is the role of GRAG in this process? So far as I know, their meeting minutes and actions are not visible to the public nor to ANG, although as I understand it, they are responsible for ensuring that actions are completed. I'm increasingly of the view that internal audit reports are read and filed, but not necessarily taken seriously. Management responses are actioned if they're easy, but are sometimes left hanging if they're difficult. Is this something that Mazars could be asked to comment on tonight and maybe added to their programme for the 2021 external audit? Because I note from the annual government statement that the Governance, Risk and Assurance Group, GRAG, chaired by the Monitoring Officer, also monitors, reviews and manages the development of the Council's corporate governance arrangements. The membership in terms of references of GRAG were refreshed in early 2020 and now has a clear reporting line to CMT as well as Audit and Governance. Does Audit and Governance know what these revised terms of reference are? I have no recollection of seeing them. And by the way, while I'm on audit, I should apologise to members for the lengthy summary I sent through to them about Section 106 after the last meeting. But in doing this work, along with a parallel review of absence management, it has, I think, highlighted the ability of experienced officers to stonewall with apparent impunity, and thus my earlier point. And while I'm at it, I still don't think that the missing 2019-20 audit reports have been published.
30 seconds.
Could they please be issued soon? My final point on the work plan, as someone infamously said, nothing has changed. But in this case, unless I've missed something, she would have been right. I still see no plan to deliver an annual review of NDAs and settlement agreements and whistleblowing. My comments in the January meeting minutes were also edited to remove mention of NDAs, so watch out for the February minutes. Apart from all that, have a lovely meeting. Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed. Yes, I think we've taken note of your comments, and you'll see that there was an amendment and a supplement to the papers to include the NDAs, which will be coming to the committee on the 14th.
I hadn't seen that, Michael. Thank you for that.
Not a problem. Not a problem. Thank you very much. And our final speaker is our first-time caller, Councillor Pete Kilbane. Councillor Kilbane, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Marvellous. Absolutely crystal clear. Thank you very much. You've got 3 minutes, Councillor. Start whenever you like.
Thank you, Chair. I've just a few questions that I respectfully lay before the committee. Does the Council Leader accept the finding of the Auditor's report before you? Does the Chief Operating Officer, Monitoring Officer, Finance Director and HR Director accept the findings of the Auditor's report? Was the departure of the previous Chief Exec a retirement or a redundancy? It was described as a retirement at the time, but we now know that it included a redundancy payment. Why were the funds paid to the ex-Chief Exec described as in line with statutory requirements when they included an ex gratia payment of £65,000 plus? Were officers under any pressure to describe the payments as in line with statutory requirements? Why did Councillor Aston not declare the fact that the ex-Chief Exec had lodged tribunal proceedings against him personally before authorising the £65,000 plus ex gratia payment to her at the Staffing Matters and Urgency Committee on Feb 17th? Why did the public only find out about the tribunal proceedings through the investigative work of York Press journalists? Did Councillor Aston expect it to remain confidential? It has been suggested that Councillor Aston had no conflict of interest at the SMU meeting, as his actions were indemnified as a representative of the Council. Is it not the case that reputational damage is also a material consideration in this matter? What advice did Councillor Aston receive or not receive before attending the meeting that agreed the settlement terms with the former Chief Exec? Why did the Monitoring Officer not remove Councillor Aston from the Staffing Matters and Urgency Committee on Feb 17th due to his potential conflict of interest? Does the Monitoring Officer now believe, in the light of the Auditor's report, that Councillor Aston had a conflict of interest when he attended that meeting on Feb 17th? At least one Liberal Democratic councillor has described the accusations levelled against Councillor Aston as part of a witch hunt. How did the auditors view the implication that their independent findings are part of a witch hunt? Does the Auditor's report bring into question the validity of the decision to make the payout, given that the business case considered by members did not include sufficient facts, both in terms of financial analysis and background information, to support an informed decision. According to the auditors, what facts were missing when the members considered their decision at SMU on Feb 17th? For example, was the ex gratia payment concealed from them? Does the auditor's report leave the council leader's position as untenable? When can we expect the auditor's final report? What is causing the delay? And in conclusion, Chair, regardless of the advice given or not given to Councillor Aston, there was no reason for him whatsoever to be in that SMU meeting on Feb 17th. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Kilbane. I'm sure many of the points that you've raised will be covered in the meeting. That is the end of the public participation element of tonight's meeting. I'd like to thank all the public participants for giving their time up. It's always valuable and always well received. Thank you very much indeed. So we shall now move on to agenda item 4, which is the Mazars Audit Completion Report. There is a short covering paper from Debbie Mitchell. Do you have anything to, Emma Audrey and Debbie Mitchell, sorry. Is there anything that either of you would want to add to that before I introduce Mazars?
No, thank you, Chair. Happy for you to pass straight to Mazars.
Thank you. So I'd like to now welcome Mark Kirkham and Mark Outerside from Mazars, and I would like them to, if they would, just introduce their roles and roles as external auditors, and any comments that they would like to make before we move to questions. Mark.
Thank you. Can do, Chair. I'll go first. It's Mark Kirkham. I'm a partner with Mazars, and we're the independently appointed external auditors for the City Council. Mark Outerside has something to say in a little while, so he can introduce himself then. So I just want to introduce the report, which is a summary of our audit findings for the 2019-20 financial year. It includes the results of our work on both the opinion and the value for money conclusion duties that we have as your independently appointed auditors. And it's actually an updated version of a report that we discussed with this committee in November, but it's still a draft report. And that's unusual because at this stage, members might expect a final version so long after the end of the financial year. But there are unusual items to consider in the report, and it's possible that this committee, as those charged with governance, might want to make representations to us, or maybe wants to share information with us that might lead us to update or refine our judgments. So for that reason of fairness, the audit report's in draft. That shouldn't be taken as me implying that we haven't got sufficient evidence to reach the conclusions that we've drafted, but it's a fairness point that just needs emphasising. Anyway, the audit completion report includes our proposed audit report in an appendix with an unqualified opinion on the accounts, but with a qualified value for money conclusion. When we planned our audit work, we identified a set of significant audit risks, and we reported those to this committee in our audit strategy memorandum. And we hadn't concluded all of the work that we needed to carry out at the November meeting. So Mark Outerside will now go through the report, letting you know what we found in connection with each of the significant risks. So that's for the opinion, and they also discuss our findings in respect of the value for money conclusion too. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark. As Mark's already alluded to, I'm Mark Outerside, and I'm the engagement manager for York City Council. I don't propose to turn all the pages, and I will take the report as read, but I will highlight those pages which have changed since the previous version of the completion report was presented in November. So on page 11 of the pack, we provide an update on the status of the audit. As you can see, the audit is almost complete, with the exception of some routine closure steps, all of government accounts work, and some work on IT general controls, which we expect to finalise very soon. Pages 13 to 17 provide an update on the significant risks highlighted in our audit plan. We're pleased to say that there were no significant issues noted in these areas. However, as expected, we have referenced a material valuation uncertainty due to the impact of the ongoing pandemic on the council's property and pension fund asset valuations, and those have been referenced in our auditor's report. This is consistent with all our other local government clients and is not specific to York City Council. Okay, page 19 highlights the modifications that we expect to include within our audit opinion, those being an emphasis of matter paragraph relating to those material valuation uncertainties that I've just referenced, and also the modification in regard to our value for money conclusion. We also highlight that there is a potential delay in issuing our audit certificate, which is due to the completion of the whole of government accounts work, which is ongoing at the moment, and consideration of an elector's objection. Again, we hope to finalise these very soon. Pages 23 to 24 confirm audit adjustments. And as you'll see, there are no adjusted misstatements, and the other errors are below performance materiality, few in number, and mainly disclosure in nature. Pages 25 to 29 provide our commentary on the value for money conclusion. As you can see, we plan to report Council has adequate arrangements for sustainable resource deployment and working with other partners and third parties. However, as you will have noticed, we will be issuing an except for conclusion in regard to informed decision-making criteria because we are not satisfied that we have received sufficient evidence in this matter. This is specific to that decision and in regard to the Chief Executive severance agreement. Work in this area is still ongoing, however, we consider it sufficient to conclude on the Council's value for money arrangements for 1920. So I don't plan to say any more on the report, however, we are happy to take any questions.
Thank you. And I will go to questions shortly, but I do want to ask, I'm going to take Chair's prerogative and ask the first question. You state that your work is still in progress in respect of certain investigations. Can you give us any sense of when those will be completed?
Thank you, Chair. I'll take that question. We're aiming to conclude that work as soon as we can. The findings that we intend to bring to the committee in a report that deals specifically in more detail about the issue of the Chief Executive's severance arrangements involves a whole series of consultations involving not just officers and management at the council and the leader of the council, it also involves the external advice that we need to take before we conclude. So it's as soon as possible isn't the answer you might be hoping for, but I can't commit to giving a specific time frame on concluding that work because it involves responses that are coming from external bodies.
Okay, thank you. Right, I've got a number of questions. The first was Councillor Hollier, then Councillor Webb, then Councillor Lomas. Councillor Hollier, I'll hand over to you. You're on mute at the moment.
Sorry, just as I headed for the button, my picture moved. I guess firstly, just to thank officers really for the work on this. I'm sure it can't have been easy, and just echoing the comments of the earlier speakers. I'm sure a lot of this work was actually completed sort of deep in summer last year, where we were probably a lot less sort of used to this kind of whole new way of working than we are now. And particularly the sort of audit and governance first timer to have ended up with a report that I can actually just about follow without sort of reaching too much for the dictionary or the thesaurus is really appreciated. So I'm sure that'll help actually, implement a lot of the sort of recommendations and things that come along. I just had a couple of questions specifically on the internal control recommendation section. And you're probably happy to sort of skip about a bit, but if I ask my questions on this and then let somebody else have a go and then sort of come back on any others later.
Absolutely.
Firstly, in terms of the members' allowances part, I wasn't able to sort of replicate that on our system, so I'm assuming that means that that's actually kind of sorted now. Following the comments the auditors made, I'm just sort of looking for the confirmation, I guess, that the auditors are happy with that sort of information that's there now. I'm sure as members would all be quite happy for the information there to be as kind of widely available as possible. I know there's a lot of sort of misinformation sort of spread about exactly what councillors get for what. So the more public and sort of transparent that is, the better. But just some confirmation really that you're happy there now.
Did you have two questions, Councillor Hollier, or do you want to ask one question and then come back for a second later?
I've got two questions on this section, so it might be worth me asking my second question on this section. I'm assuming the answer to this will be relatively quick, I'm hoping.
Right.
Just ask my second question.
The marks, members' allowances, are you satisfied that your concerns have now been addressed?
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the members' allowances control recommendation, we haven't actually followed up on what management have said is implemented at the moment, but we would routinely do that as part of the 2021 audit. So once we start that, we'll make sure that that's implemented, but we've got no reason to believe that there is an issue now.
That's fine, thank you. So I've got Councillor Webb next, and we've got hands all over. Councillor Webb, can I turn to you for next?
Thank you, Chair. And welcome, Councillor Hollier. It can't be an easy first meeting. Obviously, with everything that's going on about your leader here, this is quite tough. I suppose my question is about this ongoing delay. I've raised this several times now. Councillor Hollier said that he was glad he didn't have to reach for the dictionary. I did have to reach for my Latin thesaurus about ex gratia payments. And obviously that has been written throughout the report as one of the main reasons for the delay. So you mentioned that you had not received significant evidence yet and you were still waiting on some responses. So I was wondering if you could outline whose responses you are still waiting for, because this is quite difficult. And for example, the leader of the council, who is part of this, has he made a response about the ex gratia payments?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Webb. I hope your dictionary was in order. I do remember you asking that question in July last year when you saw the draft set of accounts. In terms of the answers to your questions, I haven't yet received a complete response to the issues that I have shared with management. The leader of the council has responded to the points that we've made in a draft report, and I've yet to fully consider those responses, and I'll do that to the extent that I think that they're relevant.
Councillor Fisher has got a supplementary. Before I go back to your supplementary, Councillor Webb,
No,
he had his hands up earlier. It's a point of
order.
order. You should have chipped in if it was a point of order. You could have just raised it as a point of order.
At no point in this report does it mention the leader of the council. Are we in order? Can I ask the monitoring officer if it's appropriate for discussing this with specifics towards the leader of the council? I know a public speaker brought it up, but I thought we were dealing with the actual procedures of the council on this here. The matter of any malpractice by members is dealt with by joint standards, is it not?
I'll hand over to the monitoring officer. Yes, I see your hand, Councillor Webb, but I do feel that the monitoring officer has been asked a question and she does need to respond.
So yes, Code of Conduct matters are for the remit of Joint Standards Committee. I think a question was asked of Mark Kirkham, and is Mark Kirkham is entitled to answer that in a way that he feels is necessary and appropriate, and I think his responses should be respected as far as that goes. Yes, you're correct. One of the public speakers did make reference to the leader, but I think it does remain the gift of Mark Kirkham or Mark Outside to decide how they wish to respond and construct their responses.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Webb, is that a supplementary or is that an additional question?
It's a supplementary.
Thank you.
And thank you, Councillor Fisher, for getting that one out of the way early. Obviously, the issue is around the staffing matters and urgency committee. The issue is around the council leader. And thank you to the Marks for responding appropriately. A question I've got is, you said that you were still waiting on some management responses. What kind of things are we talking about? Because obviously this has been with you for a long time now. So is there something that you would expect to have seen in a situation like this that you haven't?
I think the questions that we can respond to legitimately during this meeting are on the contents of the report that you've got in front of you, rather than something that you haven't got. So while we're waiting responses to the issues that we've presented, I don't think it's necessary to go into those details. This is an audit completion report that sets out our intended conclusion in relation to the council's value for money arrangements. And the reason there is a proposed qualification to that value for money conclusion is quite clearly because we're not satisfied that we've seen sufficient evidence of proper arrangements in place. So the report says that. Feel free to continue to ask questions around that, but you should also respect the fact that I will be reporting in more detail on the topic when our findings are complete.
Thank you. Well, I do have a supplementary to that before I move to Councillor Lomas. You've come to certain conclusions within this report, Mark. Are you satisfied that the conclusions that you've come to are robust ones? I appreciate this is a draft, but are these subject to amendment?
The conclusions are robust, taking account of the information that we're aware of at the moment. If during the course of this committee meeting, for example, members suggest that we ought to be aware of facts that we might not have been made aware of to date, then of course we'll take that into account. That's just pure quality assurance and our aim to make sure that the conclusions we reach are reliable and safe. We have got robust evidence in our view, unless there is other contradictory evidence that's presented to us either tonight or in due course. This will be the value for money conclusion that we issue.
Councillor Hollier, is that a supplementary to my question? Councillor Hollier.
Sorry, just in terms of, obviously we've got a commentary, which I guess is almost a sort of summary of another investigation or report. Have you any concerns, I suppose, about putting a commentary out there when the report or investigation that backs that up is not yet complete? I guess the difficult thing is the commentary before the report means we've sort of created a bit of a vacuum, which is kind of sucked in all this speculation, and sort of insinuation, I guess. That's
point of order, Chair.
Councillor Hollier, you've raised a point of order, Councillor Webb.
Yeah, I think that obviously this audit is delayed as it is, Councillor Hollier, and therefore there has to be commentary on. We wouldn't be in the position we were in if we hadn't had the commentary originally. In the fact that we wouldn't have been able to turn around to Mazars and say, look, this is something that needs to be looked into. They wouldn't have been able to go away and do that. So I think we have to allow this commentary to be in here.
to be honest, I think that's for Mark Kirkham to respond to. And thank you, Councillor Webb, for your view. But sorry, had you finished your point, Councillor Hollier?
No, if I can sort of remember the track I was on, really. Yeah, it's basically that. Is there any, is it a sort of usual thing that actually you kind of reached the point where you're sort of, I guess, satisfied enough that these aren't going to change, or is it a case that actually, it's not sort of material enough to affect the overall audit? Either way, so it's better to kind of put it out now. I guess it's just the sort of reasoning behind the early commentary without without the report already full that everybody can then see and see your full working, because it's quite difficult to get a sense of actually what's going on here. And obviously there's a lot of speculation. It's in the media. There's obviously everybody's got an opinion. Sorry, I'll stop there.
Yeah, I was just going to say, normally we try to avoid making speeches before we get to the question. It's just the way I prefer to have these meetings. So, Mark.
Yeah, thank
you. Do you have
Chair.
a response? Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Using the words in the report itself rather than what isn't there, we've identified the following significant issues. And those are those bullet points that are set out in the audit completion report in the informed decision-making section of a report that fulfills our responsibility to keep you, as those charged with governance, aware of the findings in relation to the issues that we've identified during part of our audit procedures. So where we identify areas where we aren't satisfied, we do need to report those in as efficient a way as possible to those charged with governance. And that's what this report does. So I understand why some people might choose to interpret this as a commentary or a summary of something else. This document stands alone. We have identified the significant issues listed in the bullet points. I am clear on what the implications of those bullet points are for our value for money responsibilities. And that's why this report includes a draft auditor's report with a qualified value for money conclusion. I don't see the scope for uncertainty or the need to add clarity to those words which have already been referred to as being reasonably clear.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Lomas now, who's been waiting incredibly patiently for a very long time. Councillor Lomas.
Thank you, Chair. I think it is important that we're able to make sure we all understand responses, so was happy to wait. And just a comment that I don't think it's helpful to refer to an auditor's report as something that is speculative or is speculation, because certainly in my time on this committee, we've never treated them as such. I have a few questions about the issue at hand, which is those 4 bullet points that you've been referring to, Mark. Thank you for that. Specifically, I want to ask about the 4th bullet point, which says safeguards to prevent conflicts of interest and demonstrate the council applies the principles and values of sound governance were not applied. Were you aware when looking at that of a standards complaint that I submitted in June last year, and have you considered that in coming to your conclusion?
For the question, I can confirm that I was aware of the standards complaints that were lodged in connection with this particular matter, and I haven't considered the arrangements for considering those complaints as part of our audit work. So the value for money conclusion and the bullet points don't rest on whether or not you were satisfied, for example, with how your complaint was dealt with.
Thank you. Yes, I'm aware you've got further questions, Councillor Lomas. Councillor Lomas, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry, I was my button was just not responding. Apologies. Thanks for that, Chair. Thanks for allowing me to come back in on that. Pleased to hear that that's not one of those pieces of information that you were suggesting you might be waiting for, Mark. And it just puzzles me slightly that as one of your bullet points is around safeguards to prevent conflicts of interest, which is around the code of conduct and standards, that you won't be considering standards complaints and how they should or shouldn't be responded to. And I'm not asking for a response to any complaints that have been put in. I'm asking instead whether you'll be considering the process by which complaints can be submitted, considered, and dealt with.
For your supplementary, just to clarify, I'm not trivialising the arrangement or offering a view on your complaint, but they didn't form part of the lines of inquiry that we've applied in forming a view about the City Council's arrangements for getting value for money in this report that you've got in front of you.
Councillor Lomas, supplementary.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mark. That's helpful. Are you aware of, or have you been given any information about any of the advice that might have been given in relation to conflicts of interest in relation to the decision making that's being explored here?
Thank you for that question. I will answer it with a short reply that consists of yes. And if you were to ask a question about this report, you might be asking, when we refer to safeguards as external auditors, what do we expect them to include? And the answer that I would give you to a question like that would be clear and consistent advice, consistent and usable guidance, effective induction for members, and confirmation that members understand conflict risks and management arrangements. So try to answer your question with reference to this report, Councillor Lomas.
So I've got a supplementary in respect of that. So bullet point 3, decision records that document the use of public funds under the scheme of delegation were not maintained. Is that what the type of record keeping that you've just referred to in your last answer, or does it relate to something completely different?
That's a separate matter, Chair. The point about record keeping in decision notes is essentially if officers had kept records of why they were exercising the discretions that were available to them, they would have been much better placed to respond to us and anyone else who was seeking explanations for the use of public funds. So it's also possible, if there was better record keeping, that there would be a clear and consistent approach to managing exit packages. So it's an important matter, hence it appears in our audit completion report.
So that's a significant area. Well, everybody's got hands up now. I didn't see who put their hand up for a supplementary first. I'm going to go to Councillor Lomas and then I'll go to Councillor Webb because it was your original question.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Mark. In what you were just detailing just before Councillor Pavlovich came in, you talked about clear and consistent advice and guidance, which I think is definitely something that we'll want to follow up on separately. But can you explain to me in connection with this last bullet point, which is about the conflicts of interest? What is the obligation on the monitoring officer in relation to conflicts of interest?
something that doesn't feature as part of this report, Councillor Lomas? I think that's a question that you might initially address to the monitoring officer.
Thank you. I'm going to hand that over to the monitoring officer for a response, if that's yeah, I think it is appropriate. Monitoring officer, are you able to respond to that question, that supplementary?
So I think I heard it all, so forgive me if I didn't, but the monitoring officer has a statutory responsibility to ensure that the code of conduct is published and is understood by all councillors and is also signed up to by all councillors. And with that, there's also a responsibility to ensure that register of interests are kept up to date, and a reminder that register of interests, if you become aware of an interest, should be updated within 28 days. It's also there to assist councillors in queries if they may have a declaration of interest, and we saw an example of that just prior to start of this meeting. In terms of whether I can give advice to a councillor about declaration of interest, but a Localism Act places the absolute duty on the councillor themselves to determine whether he or she has a conflict of interest for either an agenda item, on a meeting, or for a meeting. And whilst advice is given, it is up to the councillor to consider their position. The monitoring officer is also responsible for member development, and in some councils for the induction programme as well for councillors, which usually follows immediately after an election. I'm having a bit of an internet delay, so I don't know if I answered all of the question, I'm afraid.
I thought so. Councillor Lomas, given you've asked it, are you satisfied with the... Now, Councillor Webb did have a supplementary, but then I'm going to, unless Councillor Lomas had any additional questions, I'm going to move on to Councillor Fisher, then Councillor Mason, then Councillor Hollier, and then back to Councillor Webb. Councillor Webb, did you have a supplementary?
Yeah, thank you. And yes, Janie, I thought you answered that question very well. Could you just clarify then? So just to be clear, if you were aware of, and this could be for anything, you know, a conflict of interest, and you knew that a member had a conflict of interest, do you have any power, any authority to essentially say this meeting is improper, I have to step in and stop it? Do you have any obligation to make it clear in the minutes or anything like that? Or do you literally just have to rely on the member to do the declaring?
So the Localism Act places a statutory duty on every individual councillor to be aware of their position as to whether they have an interest to declare at a meeting or not. I could provide advice. I think, if I may, in response to this bullet point, I do anticipate providing all City of York councillors with additional advice, and there's ways and means of doing that going forward. And I've discussed that with both Debbie and Ian Floyd, the Chief Operating Officer. But the actual statutory duty is in accordance with the Localism Act, which rests with the elected member. So it rests with all of yourselves to determine whether you feel you've got an interest or not at a meeting. I can give advice, but ultimately it's whether you as a councillor choose to follow that or not.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, I'm going to move on to Councillor Fisher. I mean, I'm sure we will go back round again, but Councillor Fisher, you were next.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know whether Mark would like to reply to this or not, or whether he will wish to pass on it. I sit on the Joint Standards Committee, which deals with councillor complaints against councillors under the Code of Conduct. And I shouldn't name the councillor concerned, because obviously until they reach a certain level, Code of Conduct complaints are supposed to not be put in the public domain. The identity of the person being complained about is not supposed to be in the public domain. As I understand it, this complaint was put to two independent persons. A decision was made by the independent person to recommend that the complaint go no further, and I think the Deputy Monitoring Officer made a decision that it should not do so. Now, bearing in mind those two independent persons are a barrister and a former head of the, I'll get the correct name, Adjudication Panel for England, which deals with local government breaches by members. I suspect they have a considerable amount of knowledge in this area, and they would not have made the decision to recommend that the complaint goes no further. So,
Councillor Fisher, I'm really not sure that this is within the remit of this committee. I'm going to ask Janie whether she can adjudicate, because I don't think standards committee decisions are anything to do with this committee. I think the question that was raised by Councillor Lomas, sorry, if you'll just let me finish, Councillor Fisher. I think the question that was raised by Councillor Lomas was to ask Mark Kirkham whether he was aware that a complaint had gone in, and whether that formed any basis of the calculations that he made, or the adjudications that he made, and he made it quite clear that they did not.
Right, I wasn't aware that he made it clear that they're not, but, and also there is the question of timing, because
I think he said it twice.
So, Chair, can I just interrupt? Because I do not think it's appropriate to have a debate about the Code of Conduct matters. That is the remit of the Joint Standards Committee. I think Mark Kirkham has already made it very clear that it is responses in respect of the bullet point of number 4 on page 26. And I think in his response, if I can recollect that did not include a breakdown of those complaints. It was more around procedural issues that he was responding to. So this is not the forum to be having a debate about complaints, and nor is there reference of these 2 complaints in this audit completion report from memory. I've read a lot this afternoon for Joint Standards Committee immediately before this, and now I'm here, so I'm sure I'm reading the right things for the right agenda.
You are reading the right things.
There is no detailed reference, and I do not think there should be a debate about the Code of Conduct complaints in this meeting at this time.
I'll take your advice,
unless it falls within provision of Mark Kirkham's response.
That 4th bullet point clearly implies something about the Code of Conduct, and that's what concerns me.
Mark, I will hand that over to you, but that wasn't my reading of the papers. But Mark, would you like to comment?
A very brief comment. This report was about the council's arrangements. It didn't consider the standards complaints or the responses to them. So that's, I've said that several times now. I'm not sure I can make that any clearer.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just respond to say that us on this committee, you may say that, us on the committee have made points that are relevant to that. Thank you.
I'm going to move to Councillor Mason. I see your hand, Councillor Webb, but I'm going to move on to Councillor Mason because he has been patiently, well, he hasn't literally had his hand up, but he's had his virtual hand up.
Very achy.
For quite some while.
Thank you. Mark, I'll try and phrase this in a way that makes sense, and sorry if it doesn't, but normally we'd look at materiality in these type of audits at 200k would be the kind of rough limit of what we're looking for kind of discrepancies or issues around. Obviously there's a figure in the accounts of 25k that I would say relate to the chief executive, and then obviously there's been figures bandied around about 400k, and I suppose it was just to find out in your points which specific figure you were referring to.
I'm not sure I understand the question. Are you talking about materiality in respect of our opinion on the accounts? Or are you suggesting or exploring the extent to which we've got a materiality threshold for our value for money conclusion? Would you clarify, please?
Yeah, I think that's probably it. The kind of obviously the threshold is normally 200k, but obviously for this, what threshold did you apply, and what figure does that relate to? Does that make sense?
Well, let's have a go at answering your question, see if I've made sense of it. There isn't a numerical materiality level that we apply to the value for money conclusion. So that's because our role, as I've said previously, is to be satisfied about the existence of proper arrangements. And if we're not satisfied, then we should be including the reasons why in our audit report. So because we're talking about arrangements, there isn't a numerical value attached to materiality, which takes us to how we decide whether something is significant. And again, without going into detail, but I'm pretty confident that members of this committee are aware of the subject matter, and we have concerns about the arrangements that were in place, and that's why our concerns have led to those bullet points. If your question was about materiality in the statement of accounts in terms of the sums that were paid as part of the exit package, we do have a separate lower materiality level for those items that we deem to be significant because they are in the public interest. So we routinely have things like members' allowances and officer remuneration, as well as exit packages, which brings us back to the subject at hand. So I'm going to pause there and invite you to come back if I have answered your question sufficiently or correctly.
No, you've given me a good, strong answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I do have a supplementary on that then, Mark. Bullet point 1 in respect of this states that elements of the exit package described in both the business case considered by members and in the financial statements as contractual were paid at the discretion of the council and were not contractual entitlements. So could you just clarify what you actually mean by that, and what type of sums, if you're able to, that relates to?
Yes, I can. And at page 18 of the agenda pack, we refer to our work in the opinion section of the audit completion report, where we say we have concerns about the irregularity of some components of the exit package. And we've concluded that the sums involved do not present a risk of material misstatement. The key item there that we've called into question is the figure that was included in the accounts for redundancy. So at the meeting of the Staff Matters and Urgency Committee, that was referred to in the business case as being an area where council didn't have any discretion, as if this was a statutory or contractual obligation that the council had, and we don't think that's the case. So that's the audit finding that underpins that particular bullet point, Chair. So
just in respect of that then, so is your understanding that the former chief exec left as an issue of early retirement, and is the problem that there was then a component of the exit package that related to a redundancy? Because I've struggled with the public element of the report that went to Staffing Matters and Urgency about whether it was an early retirement, whether it was a business efficiency, and what exact terms it was that the chief executive left on. I will ask the statutory officers this question in a second, but I want to just understand from you what your understanding of the terms in which the former chief exec left the organisation.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Chair. It's not really a matter of understanding because the minutes which approved the severance arrangement say that the retirement request was agreed.
So it was a retirement?
The minutes say that the retirement request be agreed. So yes.
Right. In that case, can I ask then that the statutory officers why there was a redundancy element to that payment, and whether it was a statutory payment or a discretionary payment?
Yeah, shall I come in on that point?
Please do.
In regards to the reason for the departure of the former chief exec was early retirement on the grounds of efficiency, and the meeting minutes from February do go on to say that it was associated with achieving efficiencies. and the use of a pension or exit discretion in accordance with the council's policy. I think at this point might be, I suppose, it'd be a useful point for me to just take this opportunity, if I could, to just reflect and apologise actually to members of the committee that the statement that was, I think, made by me at the time of the Chief Exec's departure was lacking clarity. It was what I understood to be accurate at the time, although I do accept that the council was lawfully exercising its discretion, and therefore the phrasing of the statement shouldn't have said that all the payments were strictly contractual, because whilst there are still some differing interpretations, if you like, and as Mark Kirkham said, officers are making representation to the auditors on this matter, I think it's fair to say that I shouldn't have said that they were all contractual, and I apologise for that, because the council was exercising its discretion. So it wasn't my intention to be misleading. I guess I would, if any of us looked back over something we said or did over 12 months ago, could absolutely improve on that, and certainly would have dealt with things differently, and absolutely recognise that we should have done it differently. And certainly I would make sure that those statements were clear, that elements of the severance agreement were exercising the council's discretion within its policies. So I do apologise for that, and hope that members would accept that apology.
Certainly.
And
Thank you, Debbie.
Chair, I'd just like to echo the sentiments expressed by Debbie as well. I think hindsight is an amazing thing, and on reflection, I'm sure that both of us would do things an awful lot differently now.
Councillor Lomas, I see you've got your hand up for a supplementary.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thanks both Debbie and Janie for being so clear on that. That is appreciated. Can I just go back to something you said at the beginning, Debbie, when you said the early retirement on the grounds of efficiency? Can you just explain to me what you mean by on the grounds of efficiency? Because efficiency can mean lots of different things. So are we talking about efficiency in terms of that individual's ability or capacity to undertake the role? Are we talking about efficiency as in we'd like to save some money? Are we talking about efficiency as in we want to do things differently? What are we talking about when you say on the grounds of efficiency?
It was early retirement on the grounds of business efficiency, and the reason that it was business efficiency is that, well, as you know, subsequently the council has restructured its senior management team. At the time of that decision in February 2020, there was a proposal that at the next available meeting didn't happen because of COVID, but at the time in February, the next available meeting was due to discuss a review of the senior management arrangements. And again, as you're aware, we have subsequently deleted the chief executive's post, and as reported to SMU most recently in December 2020, the council's realised an annual recurring saving of, I think, 124,000 as a result of the deletion of the chief exec post, the creation of the chief operating officer post, and we've gone on to deliver further efficiencies as a result of the subsequent structure, reorganisation of the next tier down of directors and assistant directors. So it was business efficiency and delivery of savings.
Sorry, I did have a question, but I'll ask Councillor Lomas for her supplementary first.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Debbie. That does really help. That's really helpful. So you said there was a proposal due to go to the next available meeting, accepting that obviously then the world turned upside down for us all, didn't it? And things went slightly awry in terms of ordinary timetables. But who was making that proposal for restructure of the sort of, I would say, the most senior levels in the officer group? Who was making those proposals?
I'm not sure I know the answer to that question, actually. I don't know. Do you know, Janie? Was it?
I don't. I think that is something we'd have to look at. I think I was so new to the council that I arrived in the midst of it, so I would have to look, and we could get back to you on that.
Councillor Hollier had his hand up first for a supplementary to the supplementary, which was in itself a supplementary. Councillor Hollier.
It was just to send me help on that point. I think I'm looking through the papers and I'm never going to be able to find it now, but I think that originally goes back to a decision in 2018 to restructure the council's management.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor,
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Sorry, I'll flick through and see if I can find the reference again.
Councillor Webb, you had a supplementary.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Debbie, for your quite candid response there. A member of the public earlier said, you know, how well you'd done in a really difficult situation, but said that, you know, you were essentially going to have to defend the indefensible. And yeah, I think you were defending the indefensible. It's a tough one. It is really tough. Could you just sort of outline, I mean, how this is really serious? It was a misstatement. It was a payment that had been described incorrectly. I'm still not sure if I'm certain you can retire on the grounds of business efficiency, but you know, what pressure was under you at the time to make this to write this down as a statutory payment? I'm just trying to explore that a little bit.
I wasn't under any pressure. I'm not going to make any excuses on that score. Certainly that was on me. Yeah, I made a statement. I shouldn't have. I should have worded it differently. So yeah, no, that was on me.
Thank you. I'm going to move on because I've completely lost track of whose hands were up when. But I think it was Councillor Hollier to ask his substantive question.
Thanks, Chair. Sorry, I have found the reference. It's page 144 of the agenda at the bottom. Refers to some consultation on plans to change the operating model. I assume that's what sort of resulted in all this at the end. Just to confirm as well that when I said referred to sort of speculation innuendo, I was referring to the Labour Group's press releases, not to the auditor. I wouldn't want to sort of impugn his integrity. So if I could just ask my question, which was on the passwords, which I think was raised by a couple of the speakers. I note that the other 2 points in that section had a response from the manager. Sorry, the response from the council officers. So I'm just wondering if we could have a sort of update on where we are with that, sort of resolving these issues. Obviously, it's a very important one, and I'm sure we're all aware of sort of the big fines that you can get from the ICO, and also the sort of direct costs that potentially fall to councils that perhaps sort of make them sort of mess up in this way.
So, Chair, perhaps I can pick that
fine.
up.
Yeah.
So I'm responsible for a number of IT projects now across the council, and I have picked up, since I saw this in the earlier version of the audit completion report, I have picked up the password issue. We're now moving towards password phrases. Which is, I think I've got the right term for it. So rather than a password, it's use of a password phrase. I'm currently working with ICT, and I'm due an update by the end of April, which will look at how we can progress taking the password changes forward. There has been some delay because of the pandemic and the lockdown, but it is something that's on my radar, and I hope to address that from April.
Thank you. Councillor Hollier, you've got a supplementary to this question.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, no, it's just in terms of the sort of impact of the COVID sort of pandemic over the last year. I'm aware that obviously that's perhaps made some of the more sort of physical security measures, like needing to go into West offices to change your password on a sort of council computer, impossible. Is that part of the issues, or?
Yes, so it was. So certainly for officers and members as well, you'd have to go into West offices, and your laptop or technology has to physically log into the system. Obviously, we're not able to do that because we're not able to support a large number of people going into West offices. Also, ICT have been focusing on making sure that everybody can flexibly work and use IT maximum benefit, but I have kept it on the radar, and it is something that I will be addressing in April, so I don't want it to delay any longer. I'm now the council's CIRO as well, so obviously I've got a bigger responsibility around information governance, so it's something that I'm concerned about and I want to take forward proactively, so it will be addressed in from April.
Thank you. Now I see a number of supplementaries. Are they in relation to the password issue? Councillors Webb and Lomas, because you put your hands up first. Councillor Mason has then subsequently put his hand up, which I suspect is about the passwords. So can I just ask Councillor Webb before I go to Councillors Webb and Councillors Lomas for their supplementaries?
You mean Councillor Mason?
I did mean
Councillor Webb.
Oh, did I? Sorry.
Nothing.
I meant you, Ashley. Councillor Mason.
Thank you. I suppose, Jenny, I've worked for other organisations where we've had kind of virtual private networks, and I've been at home during this whole period, and I've had to go through that process of being able to change my password from that laptop without going to a physical building. So I suppose, is that something that long term will be possible, that we won't have to bring things in long term? We'll be able to just do that from home.
Yes, I'm hoping so. Yes, I'm absolutely hoping so. We're currently changing our sort of platform, moving towards 365. So we're doing a lot of investment in our technology and IT infrastructure at the moment. So it's part of a bigger package that deals with document classification as well. So digital records, how we archive our material. So I've incorporated it into that project to make sure that it becomes part of the normal rather than it's a standalone function on its own. It will become part of a bigger review of how we look after our information.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just from an audit perspective, you'll be looking into that in the 2021. Councillor Lomas, you had supplementary, it might be more than one now.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I wanted to just come back on that password thing. I'm able to access council IT, have been able to since I was inducted. I've been able to change my password remotely without going into West offices ever since 2019. It's not quite clear to me why staff aren't able to do that. The only challenge I ever have is if I forget to do it on time. It's the being locked out bit that then is a bit more of a challenge, but a friendly colleague is always able to help me. But it is completely possible to change your password while logging in to the remote desktop. So
I haven't been able to do that though.
So.
I don't know why. Maybe
you
it's
can
just
do.
me doing it.
But back to my original, Councillor Hollier attempted to help us with the question that that had been asked around the reason for this early retirement on grounds of efficiency, and directed us to page 144 to 145 of our packs, which I appreciate is item 5. But I think, Councillor Hollier has suggested that the decision made in the Staffing Matters and Urgency Committee on the 17th of February 2020 was directly as a result of the decision that they made on the 11th of October 2018. And I'd just like to ask, is that the case?
Are you asking the statutory officers now?
Yeah, I'm asking the statutory officers. Was the decision made in February 2020 as a direct result of the consultation that was launched in October 2018?
No, I don't think it was. I think that was a restructuring that the former chief exec started herself. But like I say, we'd appreciate it if you could just give us some time and we can come back to you on that.
Thank you, Debbie. That is appreciated. So I think it is worth just noting that the decision made in February 2020 was not as a result of the decision that was made earlier in 2018, and perhaps that needs to be separated somehow, because as it appears in the document, it's under that title as a a paragraph, and perhaps it does just need to be explained a bit more.
I just want to ask Mark Kirkham, has anything that you've heard about the staffing reorganisation, the business efficiency element of this, made any has it had any influence on your qualified value for money statement?
No, Chair, not a bit.
No, I didn't think so. Councillor Webb.
Thank you. My arm was getting a bit tired.
I did see it earlier.
I know. Back on the main issue that we're dealing with tonight in the staffing matters and urgency matter. Councillor Hollier earlier on suggested that it was the Labour Party that was saying something was an issue. And I'd just like to refer to one of the public speakers' questions, and this might be a question for Mazars, in that essentially a member of the Liberal Democrats accused you of being part of a witch hunt. As an independent auditor, I'd like a response to that, please.
Thank you for the request for a response. I wasn't aware of that, and the response is baseless claims need very little effort in rebutting. So if there's any basis for that sort of comment, then I'd like to hear. We regularly report on our independence to this committee. Our independence has never been called into question by any member of this committee or anyone else within the council, be it in the any political group or any person who has a management function. So my closing comment is, what a surprise.
Right. I am going to ask members now. We take party politics out of audit and governance. Nobody has questioned the independence of Mazars. If there was ever any implication that Mazars have been anything other than independent, I would like to challenge that. I don't want to hear the Labour group, I don't want to hear the Lib Dem group, I don't want to hear any other group in the rest of this meeting, if that's okay. Councillor Hollier.
Thanks, Chair. I hear what you say, but I do think it needs putting on record that is not what the Liberal Democrat group said at all, and there is no...
Right, I've heard it, thank you, noted. We move on. Councillor Fisher.
Sorry, I do have another question.
Oh, Councillor Fisher had his hand up, so he's letting that go. So I will now ask Councillor Hollier to ask his Councillor Lomas. We are going to have we're going to have a break shortly.
I appreciate that, Chair, but there are three of us that have had our virtual hands up to ask questions for some time, and I don't believe Councillor Hollier has.
This is supplementary to the point you raised. My hand was up like this.
Oh, right. Okay, so another supplementary.
Yes, so,
it's just we'd gone off on a different tangent. Apologies.
No. And Councillor Daubney's been waiting since the last Preston Guild, so I will be going to him shortly before I go back to yourselves. Councillor Hollier, do you want to finish your supplementary?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Sorry, it was just going back to the point about the restructure going back to 2018. I don't think I was saying that the chief executives changes were as a direct result of those, but somebody asked when these originally came up, and obviously the changes to the corporate structure date back to 2018 and obviously build on one another. So I'm not saying directly, but clearly.
I genuinely don't think this is relevant to what we're to what this committee is discussing. I'm going to move on.
Somebody says something, you've got to correct the record, haven't you?
Yeah. Councillor Lomas.
Yeah,
then
thank
I'm going
you, Chair.
to move to Councillor Daubney.
I think perhaps Councillor Hollier misheard my question, and I didn't misunderstand at all. I asked a question of the statutory officers about what was meant by early retirement on grounds of efficiency. And then the response said that it was on the basis of proposals that were made, and I asked about whose proposals, and both Debbie and Janie said they were going to take that away. At that point, Councillor Hollier, you intervened and referred us to page 144 and 145 of our packs, and those paragraphs which I then explored further with help from everybody, which I am grateful for, and we clarified that the proposals about the chief executive post and those very senior levels didn't come from as a direct result of the decision made in 2018. So that's the little history of what we've just said. Nothing's been misunderstood, Councillor Hollier. I asked a legitimate question about the early retirement on grounds of efficiency. I was given a response, which I then asked some questions to make sure that I understood where that came from. I don't sit on the Staffing Matters and Urgency Committee, so I think it was highly appropriate for me to do that because that's what I'm here to do.
Thank you, noted. I'm going to move on to Councillor Daubney. I'm going to ask you, Councillor Daubney, to ask your question, and then I will be calling for a break. I did wonder whether we'd be finished this agenda item before we had the break, but we'll have gone for an hour and a half, and I think that that's sufficient time for us all to have a 10-minute comfort break. Councillor Daubney.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I've obliged to you. I'm just hoping there's is perhaps a simple and quick question for Mazars to answer for us. I know there were concerns around the North Yorkshire Pension Fund. I'd just like to know what they were and how it was resolved. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. With regard to the pension fund, it was very much similar to the issues that we were looking at the council, in that the pension fund in their accounts referenced a material valuation uncertainty around their pension fund assets, and we just had to reflect on that within our report. But it was literally that, just a material valuation uncertainty that they put in around the value of their assets at the year end due to the unknowns around COVID and what impact they could have on the pension fund's assets.
Thank you, Mark. That's very clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. It's now 7 p.m. I'm going to call a break for 10 minutes. We will come back to this. I see a number of hands raised. Councillors Webb, Councillors Lomas and Councillor Fisher. I will ask them in those order when we get back, but we will reconvene at, is everybody satisfied with the 10-minute break? Yeah, if a 10-minute break is sufficient, then we will have a 10-minute break. Thank you. Thank you. I think we're ready to go back, though we don't seem to have the representatives from Mazars on screen at the moment. Can I just ask the tech team if they are still available? We've got Mark Kirkham. And we've got Mark outside. Thank you. Before I go on to the next set of questions, I just want to say I do recognise just how important this is, and that we're looking at some significant and serious issues. And this certainly isn't the easiest meeting to chair. And I would just like to just remind all members that we do want to try to keep this meeting as not pleasant, but within the scope of this meeting. I'm going to go to Councillor Webb, who raised his hand first, then Councillor Lomas, then Councillor Fisher, and then Councillor Hollier. Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Councillor Pavlovic, and given the nature of this meeting, given the impacts, the effects of it, you know, I think you're doing an excellent job as a chair. I think it's important to say that now. My question, I've got two questions. My first one is probably better to Mark, and it is about, could you just explain a little bit more about when you've said, oh, this is a qualified report or an unqualified report, could you just explain a little bit about what that actually means? And then my second question is, on page 6, this is probably maybe more for Debbie, right at the very start, on the implications section, it suggests that there are no financial HR equalities, legal, crime, disorder, that sort of thing. There are no implications. Now, is that because this is a draft report? Or what would the implications be longer term? Thank you.
So the first question was to Mark Kirkham, and it was in relation to qualified and unqualified assessments.
Yeah, thank you for the question, and thanks for the clarification, Chair. The question effectively is what is qualified report? So our proposed wording is at page 36 of the agenda pack, and there's the heading in that part of the report, which is our statutory auditor's report that will need to be published within the City Council's statement of accounts. And on that page, you can see the headings, qualified conclusion except for, and the basis for that qualified conclusion. Effectively, just to cross-refer to some of the things that I said earlier in the meeting, if we were satisfied that we'd seen sufficient evidence of proper arrangements, there wouldn't have been a reason to qualify our value from a conclusion. It's because we're not satisfied, based on the information that we've seen to date, that we're proposing this intended qualified value from a conclusion.
Thank you. Are you satisfied with that, Councillor Webb? And then I'll ask Debbie to comment on the front page, if you like, of her introduction around the implications.
Yeah, so there are no direct implications as a result of the audit completion report that you're considering this evening. There's no qualification to the accounts, there's no changes to the accounts. I think, though, it's fair to say that when Mazars return to this committee with their more detailed report that specifically deals with the issue that we've been discussing, then there will be an action plan, and there may potentially be some implications. Well, there will be some implications as a result of that action plan. Whether or not there will be any financial or other implications, or whether it's things that officers will be able to do with members relatively quickly, we'll need to await Mazars' final report and the recommendations and action plan that officers will then take forward at that point. So the next report that you get will potentially have some implications as a result of the action plan.
Thank you. Councillor Webb, you've got supplementary.
Yeah, thank you, Debbie. And that was very clear again. I suppose my final question on this would be, and how will those implications be sort of presented to all members, the public? Obviously, they'll come to this committee, I imagine, but how there's a need for openness here. So how are we going to make that happen?
I think that once we've got the final report and following the discussions with Mazars, then Ian Floyd, as the head of paid service, will take forward the action plan, and he will be responsible for the delivery of that action plan. And I know Ian is committed to being transparent and open and discussing that with all members and the relevant whoever else is interested, any other stakeholders. So I think there's a definite commitment from officers to that transparency and openness in terms of delivering on the action plan and recommendations of Mazars.
Thank you. Councillor Lomas, then Councillor Hollier, then Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question going back to the 4 bullet points. The second bullet point talks about the business case not including sufficient facts. So I'd just like to ask Mark, what was not included, what was missing, what would have been expected that wasn't in there, in order to help the members to make that informed decision.
Yeah, that was a question I was going to ask, so thank you, Katie. Mark.
Yeah, thank you. As has been mentioned early before the break, the business case didn't include clarity on the nature of the entitlements or the discretions that members were being asked to approve. Members were told the discretion was only in relation to the settlement agreement, and those are the findings that are relevant to the audit completion report.
And sorry, Katie, are you satisfied with that? Because I've got a supplementary. And will that be part of your second report when that ultimately comes to us?
Chair, I understand why there would only be partial satisfaction with the answer I've just given. And so thank you for the opportunity to just say yes on that topic. There is more to say.
Thank you. Councillor Hollier, you've both got your hand up and you've got your hand up, if that makes sense.
This is just a supplementary, Chair. Thank you.
Well, then you can go straight into, after the supplementary, you can go straight into your question.
All right, it's only a short little question, but maybe a
right.
Slightly longer supplementary. Does it change the business case, I guess, in a sense of whether or not you get whether it's a good business case, depending on which sort of pot of money, if it's discretionary or contractual? Presumably the overall quantum of money, in a sense, is the same. It doesn't matter which sort of pot it comes from. I imagine for a sort of early retirement business case, it's probably actually quite a simple calculation. You've got her salary, I guess, as a saving, and then on either side you set against that the costs essentially of the early retirement, pension strain and all the rest of it. And then you sort of compare the two and say, does this seem like a good deal? And I guess there's some sort of, I don't know, rule of thumb for how many years payback or something that might be considered to be, a reasonable deal in that sense. So I guess, does that affect the business case, I guess, the discretionary, or is it actually the total quantum of money and that sort of comparison that really is the issue?
I see your hand, Councillor Lomas.
Chair, I'm just a bit unclear as to Councillor Hollier seems to know what the business case was. Is he suggesting that he has seen the business case or more information about it? I'm just unclear as to how he would know what made up that business case.
That's a supposition on my part as to what I imagine a business
Speculation.
case for retirement to be. Well, that's why I'm asking the question.
Okay.
You know, it's not a difficult concept, is it? We're looking to save a salary, set against that is the cost to the early retirement.
Yeah, I get the question. Mark, can you answer that?
I understand the question in as far as the severance terms. I don't understand the question in as far as the councillor was referring to pots of money. So it is important for a business case to be clear on the nature of the severance, because the entitlements and the obligations stem from that.
So
I don't understand the point. If you've got a point or a question about pots of money, I'm afraid, councillor, I didn't really follow that.
I'm going to ask Councillor Hollier. I see your hand, Councillor Lomas, but I am going to ask Councillor Hollier to clarify his question, and given that he's asked it.
Well, just that, in a sense, what we're talking about is the contractual and the ex gratia payments. Presumably, they form part of the overall business case compared to the saving. Does it really matter, in a sense, for considering whether a business case is good or not, and whether it's a good deal, as to whether or not a payment is contractual or, you know, part
Can I
of
just
that?
ask? Can I just ask Councillor Hollier? I'm sorry, I'm not trying to put words into your mouth, but are you talking about the amounts that are in the accounts that are publicly that are in the public domain?
Yeah, the amounts that.
Point of order, Chair.
Point of Councillor Webb, you've raised a point of order, and we've before you raise that, Councillor Webb, we seem to have lost our monitoring officer, and if you're asking a point of order, I think it's one that the monitoring officer would have to respond on. We've got her back.
Sorry, Chair, I'm really struggling. I kind of fell out of the meeting and I don't know how. So sorry about that.
Right. Councillor Hollier had asked a question. I don't know when you dropped out. Councillor Hollier asked a question about the total amount of the severance, the exit settlement payment. And he asked Mark Kirkham, and sorry, Mark, if I'm answering this for you, but he asked Mark Kirkham whether the total quantum of the figure was accurate. Mark stated that he didn't quite understand what the question was, and I asked Councillor Hollier if he could just clarify what his question was. He then clarified the point, and Councillor Webb has subsequently raised a point of order on that, which we haven't heard, which I'm now going to ask him to state so that you can respond to it. Councillor Webb, your point of order.
Thank you. As this is audit and governance, what we're discussing in as far as I'm aware, is the regularity of that ex gratia payment. We're not discussing, we've made it quite clear, we're not saying that the numbers are wrong and that Debbie hasn't done her job and the books haven't been balanced. And so I think that Councillor Hollier is asking the question, is there a problem that, you know, this money's been spent? But what we're discussing is not that. We're discussing that actually there's an ex gratia payment been paid which could have otherwise gone to council services. So yeah, I think Councillor Hollier is on the wrong track here.
I'm going to ask you to comment on that, Janie, but and I see Councillor Lomas is also raising her hand. Do you want to? Sorry, I'm going to ask Councillor Lomas before you respond, just in case she's got any additions to the point of order. Right.
No.
Janie.
Yeah, might I?
Of course you can. Yeah, absolutely.
To answer the question as I interpreted it, because if this is a real question, it does rather get to the heart of things. I think the question was, and of course this is subject to clarification, does it matter if the business case wasn't any good, if there was a payback period for savings that were made for someone that was leaving the employment? And my short answer is yes, of course it does. Without a good business case, how can members make a properly informed decision? How can members be assured that the amounts that they are spending on behalf of the public are regular and done with full propriety? So, of course, it matters.
Thank you. Do you want to add anything to that, Janie? But I think that's a very clear
yes,
response.
Yes, I would if that's okay.
Of course
So
it is.
I just want to comment something on directly what Mark has said. Without question, with hindsight, the business case template is not fit for purpose. I've reviewed it in light of this. I've sought external opinion on what should be a fit for purpose business case going forward. I'm not saying for a minute that I ever want to be in this position ever again. However, what I do think is this is part of the learning, in that, yes, the business case template, which I think was approved or went via this committee prior to my arrival, I think in York, does need to be reviewed. If it was in a better format, if it was in a more detailed framework, for example, it would contain a lot more detail. It would offer ability to have a lot more challenge. And I think that is part of the learning taking from this. So I wholly accept that the business template that was used on this occasion was not fit for purpose, and I apologise for that. It's something that was adopted by the council, but going forward, I'd hope to use my position in consultation with Ian and Debbie and HR, so that we can have a better template going forward, should the need arise to use one.
Yeah, I see two hands, but I'm going to ask a supplementary of Mark in respect of that. Was the issue that you've raised in respect of Councillor Lomas's question in respect of the business case, was it that the business case template didn't contain enough information, or that the information that it contained was incorrect?
Sorry, I'm not sure who you're asking.
I'm asking Mark.
Oh, right, sorry.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, the information contained within the business case wasn't satisfactory, in my view. And just going back to Councillor Hollier's point, it matters because without clarity, without completeness, without the full representation of everything that's relevant, how can members be assured that they're making decisions within the law? How can members be assured that they're making the best possible use of public money if the business case isn't mapped out properly? So that
is one of your concerns. I'm going to ask Councillor Lomas, because she raised her hand first. Councillor Lomas.
Thank you, Chair. The reason why I wanted to come back in on this is that Councillor Hollier said a few times when he was asking his question that if it is in order to make savings, and I'm paraphrasing, this may not be the exact word he used, if it's in order to make savings, does it matter whether the money was discretionary or statutory? And I'm not clear where that he's come to that understanding that the payment was only made in order to save money. And that's what I've questioned. I've questioned it a few times. I've questioned Councillor Hollier on it just before we went to break. Where is the evidence? Was it in the business case? I don't know. I haven't been privy to that. That the decision to make these payments was about saving money. Because I can't see any evidence for that, and I don't know whether Councillor Hollier can enlighten us with where he's got that information from, or whether Mark might be able to shed any light on it, because Mark, I know that Mark has spent a lot more time looking at the detail of this than any of us have.
Yeah, just for clarity, just to explain to the members of the public that may be watching, the business case that was presented to SMU was contained within what we call salmon papers, which were confidential papers that were only available to members of that committee and the officers that prepared it. I have to say, for full disclosure, that since the issues have arisen in respect of the settlement payment, I have seen the business case as chair of Audit and Governance. It's my understanding that no other members of council have seen the business case, but I will hand over to Mark to respond.
Yeah, thank you. I'm invited to comment in a bit more detail on the business case. I'm not going to comment on audit findings that aren't in this report. And you can infer from that that we probably will have more to say on it, but now isn't the time to do that.
Thank you. Thank you. Right, I'm going back to substantive questions, and Councillor Fisher had his hand up. Councillor Fisher.
Thank you. First of all, can I just correct something that was said earlier in the meeting? Nobody no councillor has accused you of impartiality. I have looked up the quote and nobody has accused you of a witch hunt. The reference to witch hunt was something completely different and not relevant to you. And I strongly apologise for the perception that you may have been accused of that, because it was not.
I did say that at the time, Councillor Fisher.
Thank you very much. I just want to make that absolutely clear coming from me as Vice Chair. I have some interesting comments about page 21 and the comments about valuations. Now, clearly valuations, we have an awful lot of stuff that needs valuing, from property through to the heritage assets and so on. And you state that we should challenge our valuers. Could I just ask you for a clarity about how do we do that? How do we get accurate valuations on assets like that? Presumably you ask an expert, you normally take their opinion, but clearly you have some views that we should do a bit more. Could you clarify what it is, please?
I think that's Mark Outerside. Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so that is around, you do rely on a professional, as in the valuer. He does give you those values to put into your accounts. But what we were referring to is just seeing a little bit more challenge around what information the valuer gives you. Because all professionals do make mistakes, and it would just be nice to see those checks and balances in place at the council, just to make sure that they do get sufficient assurance that that information is factually correct. And in the case of a valuer, they rely on judgments, on estimations, and that's the difficult bit.
Yeah.
And just relying on that carte blanche might be, it's better to have done something rather than just accepting it and putting it straight into the accounts. And that's what we were referring to.
Thank you. Because the other way of valuing something is to sell it. And unfortunately, with heritage assets, the art collection and the city walls, that's not an option. But thank you for that.
I'm just going to ask Debbie, as Section 151 officer, does she accept that? And are there processes in place in respect of challenging valuations moving forward?
Yeah, we absolutely accept the recommendations made by Mazars in this audit completion report, and I guess just a reference back to, I think one of the public speakers seemed to think that we weren't fully accepting the recommendations, but that's not our intention. We weren't intending to disregard or diminish those recommendations. Absolutely accept them. The points that both Mark and Councillor Fisher made, it is difficult for accountants to challenge property valuers, but Mark and Mazars have absolutely given us some indicators of how we can do that, and using our own internal property staff alongside external experts as a way of that cross-check and challenge.
Thank you.
Good as well. I think it's worth saying that this isn't just specific to York. It's a sector issue.
Thank you. I'm going to move to Councillor Webb. Then I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and then I think we will round up. Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Chair. This is a question, I think, for Janie, probably. Janie, sort of based on what you've heard tonight and what's within the... Oh, has she just disappeared on me?
Yes, she has.
Oh, she's back.
I'm sorry, I am here. I'm just really struggling with my internet, and I've been advised to turn the camera off.
I was just going to say, Janie, if you are turning your camera off, can you just tell us you're going to turn your camera off so we don't think you've gone and you've dropped out of the meeting?
I am.
You are listening. Don't worry about it. No, thank you, Janie. So yeah, based on what you've heard and what is obviously in the report so far, are you satisfied that at the time of that standard Staffing Matters and Urgency Committee that you acted correctly and within the regulations as far as you were aware of them? And do you now believe that the leader did have a conflict of interest?
So what I would like to say is that at the time of the Staffing Matters meeting, I'd been in York 9 weeks, and 2 of those were Christmas and New Year. It is impossible as the monitoring officer to, within 9 weeks, to learn the entire history of the council or any issues or matters that have been raised. In terms of meeting the statutory requirements of my job role as a monitoring officer, yes, I feel that within the 9 weeks that I was there of that decision, I fulfilled those. Hindsight is a tremendous thing. I've learned a lot in the last just over 12 months. And I think that this process has also confirmed some of my views, has also made me reflect quite significantly. But I think, I think I acted within the statutory requirements of the monitoring officer role within the first 9 weeks of my attendance at City of York.
Thank you. Councillor Webb, supplementary.
Thank you, Janie. And for the record, I didn't doubt that you would have asked the relevant questions at the right time. On my second question, do you now believe that the leader did have a conflict of interest? Could you just give us an answer about that?
I don't think that's appropriate for me to respond to. I can give advice as the monitoring officer, and it's for an elected member, whether it's the leader or yourself, the chair of Audit and Governance, to decide whether they've got an interest or not, as I've already said. So the role of the monitoring officer is to give advice. It's entirely dependent on others of whether they choose to accept it or not. But I feel that I've acted within my statutory responsibilities as a monitoring officer based on 9 weeks of being in York. With 2 of those, I wasn't in the building at all for Christmas and New Year.
Thank you, Janie.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions for Mark, if that's okay. You've stated on page 37, we cannot formally conclude the audit and issue an audit certificate until we have completed our work on the objection raised. And you have made reference to that earlier on this evening. In the next agenda item, we are being asked to sign off the audit. Are you wholly satisfied that there is no information that you will subsequently provide to this committee that would impact on our ability to sign this off tonight? Councillor Lomas, are you asking a supplementary before I ask this question?
I just wanted to clarify something, Chair, because I thought we weren't being asked to sign off an audit. We're being asked in the next agenda item to sign off the accounts.
Sorry, the accounts. I'm sorry, you're absolutely correct. I meant to say the accounts. My error, yes. We're being asked to sign off the accounts. So I go back to my original question. Are you wholly satisfied that we have all the information that we could possibly require to be able to sign off the accounts this evening?
Yeah, I understand the need for caution. Thank you for the question, Chair. The need for caution and an awareness of risks and threats is always pertinent. And based on the information I've got, I don't think that there would be anything that would be an obstacle to you doing that, but it's your judgment because they're your accounts. And you started off the question with a reference to the page in our report where we talk about the need to determine an objection. That won't have any impact on your role. The objection came in after we'd started to investigate the entries in the council's accounts. The objection hasn't added any lines of inquiry to the work that we're carrying out, but we do need to go through a full and proper process of making sure that we respond appropriately to the elector in line with the Local Audit and Accountability Act. So that's more a duty for us than a threat to you.
Okay, so just on the strength of that, if you find the objection to the accounts valid, would you potentially be making any changes to the accounts that we're being asked to sign off this evening? The only reason I'm asking this question is, would we be better off holding that, deferring that the accounts to be signed off until after the stage 2, if you like, of this process?
Yeah, I understand the need for caution, and to bear that in mind, on page 18 of our report, we make it clear that we are not satisfied with certain entries in the accounts because of the regularity of them is in question. But we don't think that should have an impact on our opinion on the accounts because of our materiality in the application of that particular concept. So you should bear that in mind, but as I said earlier, they're your accounts and it's for you to decide on whether they're going to be approved now or later. I don't want to influence you in any way, but we are sufficiently versatile to respond to your timetable and your approvals.
Thank you. Councillor Lomas, you had a supplementary. No, you didn't. Fine. I don't see any additional hands being raised. I would just wonder, Mark, given that the accounts are the next agenda, the marks, sorry, both of you, whether you could possibly stay with the meeting, perhaps off screen, just in case there are any additional questions when we get to agenda item 5. Would that be okay?
Yes, I confirm that's fine. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. As I said at the outset, this has been a very difficult set of issues. They clearly are in the public domain. I would like to thank Mazars. I'd like to thank the statutory officers and members. Am I still able to be heard? Sorry, there's just a message come up and said I've now, my default speaker has changed. I don't even know what that means, but I'll just work on the assumption that unless somebody waves at me, they can hear me. And I was just in the position of just thanking everybody for the care and the very clear scrutiny that we've given this issue. I hope that that's been clear to both members and to members of the public that may be watching. So I do thank you very much. We will be revisiting the specific issues that are raised in respect of the qualified value for money statement that you've made. You can't give us a definitive date. I certainly picked that up, but you do believe that it will be relatively soon. Is that correct? And then I will just thank you and we'll move on to the next agenda item.
We'll be completing our work and reporting as soon as possible, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. So on that happy note, we will ask you if you can switch your cameras off, and we will then move to agenda item 5, which is the statement of accounts. And I will ask Debbie Mitchell if she would introduce this agenda item, and Emma, we've got Emma. Hello, Emma. Thank you for your patience. I don't know who wants to start or who wants to speak on this.
I'll just do a very brief introduction, Chair. So this report follows on from the previous item. You've just had the auditor's audit completion report that's highlighted for you any changes or misstatements or issues. As outlined in that report, there are no significant changes to the accounts since you last reviewed them in November, and therefore you are being asked to formally approve them so that the Chair and myself as the Section 151 officer can sign off the 2019-20 accounts, just given it's 1st of April tomorrow, and we're just about to do the 2020-21 accounts, so to avoid a bit of a pile-up. The only other thing to draw particularly your attention to is the annual governance statement. I think as we discussed in November, we have re-included the absence management issue following the discussion last time. And I would also just take this opportunity to remind the committee members that this is a live document, and therefore we are constantly updating that. And therefore we will also reflect any recommendations that come from the subsequent Mazars reports. They will also be reflected in the annual governance statement. So this is, whilst it was the position at 31st of March last year, it has been kept up to date, and we do treat it as a live document. So, and like I say, Emma's here if there are any technical type questions.
Thank you. Thank you. I will open it to questions, and I've got Councillor Lomas.
Thank you, Chair. Just following on from a discussion we had in the last item, I wonder if there can be an amendment made to the section that starts at the bottom of page 144 of our packs and is page 81 of the document and goes on to the following page, so that it's clear that the decision made in February 2020 by Staffing Matters and Urgency didn't flow from the decision made in October 2018, because clearly that's caused some confusion this evening, and I wouldn't want it to sit on record if it's going to cause future confusion.
Debbie or Emma, I don't know who wants to respond to that.
I mean, it is correct in that the then Chief Executive in December 18 did, and Staffing Matters and Urgency Committee did agree to a revised structure for the customer and corporate services. So that kind of follows in order. And then obviously, so that explains why there were some changes during the year, and particularly the Director of Governance role was created as a result of that initial restructure. So that text is just there to explain the different costs of the statutory officers in the tables proceeding. So I think it's factually correct.
Councillor Lomas, I suspected.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just getting myself confused then, because in our earlier discussion it was clarified that those weren't kind of decisions flowing from one another. So was what was presented in 2018, is that the structure that we have today? No, it's because I take your point. I think it's our attempt to try and clarify, when you look at the cost of the chief officer's remuneration, which are the statutory officers in the tables proceeding. So on pages, it's page 78 of the accounts. I can't quite see the 141 and 142. Yeah. That sets out why, I suppose what we're trying to explain is that on page 141, the officer's remuneration in 1920 shows that there was an interim assistant director for legal and governance and director of governance, whereas during 1819 there was just an assistant director of legal and governance. So that text was an attempt to try and explain why there were those you know, if you could go a full 12 months, well, full 24 months without a staffing restructure, then in theory those two tables would be identical, and the only difference would be the amounts from increments or pay awards. I don't know that we've had a full 2 years on the trot without any changes, but so it's just an attempt to try and explain that difference.
Councillor Lomas.
Yeah, thanks for that, Debbie, and that does definitely make sense. I think though that you can understand why it could be read that there was one decision to have a restructure, and then those 3 paragraphs were all part of that decision to have a restructure, and it seems that that is not the case. And that being said, we shouldn't let it sit in our accounts in a way that could suggest that. I mean, you could correct it by saying corporate management team restructures, and just the simple addition of an S in that title, I think would probably would probably go a long way. I'm thinking about, you know, if we were to read this, a whole different group of people were to read this next year, which understanding would they leave with? And I think that it should not be seen as one discrete piece of work that was carried on over a period of 2 years, because that doesn't appear to me on the information that I've heard this evening to be the case. I, you know, I'm happy to be corrected if I've taken away the wrong understanding of that, but from what I've heard this evening, that there was a plan, a proposal presented in 2018, and then separately in 2020 a further proposal was put, rather than all of those 3 things flowing from that 2018 decision.
Yeah,
I mean, I think that's an eminently sensible suggestion.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, we can make that amendment. That's fine.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Webb, you've got your hand raised.
Thank you, Chair. It's going back to the questions that you were asking to Mark just before the end of item 4 about whether it's right and proper for us to sign off these accounts or approve these accounts. So on the first page of item 5, 2B suggests approve the amended financial report at Annex A for signature by the Chair from a resolution of this committee in accordance with the Accounts and Audit Regulations 2015. Personally, I don't feel like we can do that right now. And I want to make it very clear that is not because I doubt anything that Debbie has done or anything that Emma has done on the financial side of things. But if I turn to page 68 and 69 of our packs, which is the independent auditor's report, we again have those 4 bullet points related to the exit package. And on page 69, a delay in the certification of the completion of the audit. And I would feel very uncomfortable, even by accident, pushing this down the road a little bit until it is actually solved, completely done, dusted, and we have our final next meeting that Mark has just promised on this. You know, I mean, when we first become councillors, we're told about the Nolan principles, you know, and one of those is honesty, another is integrity. What else have we got? Openness and accountability. For me, those points mean that as councillors, I don't think we can sign this off. I do think we have to declare this tonight. That's what I'm proposing, because quite frankly, we are not in a position to sign this off until we have the full evidence. As Mazars has already pointed out to us, they have not received the full evidence. And if we want to do this by the book and we want to do this properly, I believe they have to receive that evidence. They have to make a judgment. They have to bring that judgment to us. We have to audit it and inspect it. And then we can make that decision. I just don't think right now we're in that position. Thank
Debbie,
you.
Thank you. I mean, there was a question there, which basically was, without Mazars having completed their investigations, is it safe for us to sign off the accounts this evening? And I saw your hand, Councillor Fisher. I will come to you in 1 second.
Yeah, I can understand members' concerns, absolutely. From my point of view, I think Mazars have made it clear that the things that they are looking at and that they are still forming an opinion on don't have any impact on the accounts themselves. Whatever happens and whatever comes in the next report and whatever conclusions and actions and things are drawn, a number will not change in the statement of accounts. So from my point of view, they're fine to sign up. Having said that, we've waited, we're about to do this year's accounts another couple of months. If members would be more comfortable waiting until Mazars have completed all their work and given the audit certificate, that's absolutely not an issue from an officer perspective. More than happy for you to wait until you feel ready to sign them off.
Yeah. Councillor Fisher, you had your hand raised first, and then I see you, Councillor Lomas.
Thank you. I think we're conflating two things. One is the outcome of the audit report, and one is the accuracy of the counts. I don't think there is any question about the accuracy of the counts, and that is what we've been asked to sign off today. And I see no reason why we should delay it. I think Debbie's done a fantastic job of getting these accounts ready under very difficult circumstances, and they're accurate. Mazars have made it quite clear that nothing they come up with in the audit will affect the accuracy of these accounts. So I see no reason whatsoever in delaying them.
Thank you. Did somebody? Yes, Councillor Lomas had their hand up. Oh, and Councillor Webb. Councillor Lomas.
Thank you, Chair. I think if the accounts as they're presented here just contained numbers, then I'm sure what Councillor Fisher says would stand, and nobody's doubting the numbers, and I think Councillor Webb made that really clear. But the accounts as they sit before us this evening also contain a lot of words and a lot of narrative and explanation of the numbers, and so I think that it is important that we have the best understanding we can have of everything that has contributed to all of the words and numbers that make up this document, and while there may not be anything that is to come that will change a number that is in these accounts, there may well be narrative that needs to change to properly explain the numbers that we see on the pages. And so for that reason, I think that it would be wrong of us, without being in full possession of the facts, with our independent auditors telling us there is more information to give, and I think I wrote that down as a quote from Mark Kirkham, that there is more information to give us on this. I would not be comfortable in accepting the accounts at this point, and I think it is right to defer that decision until we're in possession of all the information there is to have, to allow us to make a judgment about whether the narrative that sits alongside the numbers is a proper account. And I don't know if you realise you're not on mute, Councillor Fisher, so
no,
if I am allowed to finish without interruption, I think that apologies, Chair.
I was just going to say, could everybody that's not currently speaking put themselves on mute, apart from myself? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I do think it would be wrong of us to sign off the accounts until such times we've seen that information. And as Debbie has helpfully said, there is no significant impact on us if we don't sign them at this point. And I think we should wait until we've got all of that information.
Councillor Lomas, there has been a proposal made. Are you seconding that proposal?
Happy to, Chair.
Thank you. So we will be going to a vote ultimately. Councillor Daubney had his hand raised, and then I saw Councillor Webb had his hand raised. Councillor Daubney.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to agree with Councillor Fisher's approach to this. That is that the accounts and the audit are two separate things. We're very aware that the auditors have some matters still to determine, and we await their report with interest. But I think the accounts themselves, I certainly have no doubt at all of their validity, and there's no material difference in those matters still to come, which would affect the accounts themselves. So I should be voting for the accounts. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Webb.
Thank you. Sort of as a right of reply, I suppose, to this, within the words of the thing that the audited accounts that we're meant to be signing off, we've got the total value of the exit package was £377,115.23, comprising of a £24,884.37 redundancy payment, which we've already been questioning tonight, a £65,779.06 ex gratia payment, which was the basis of all the issues that we've had, a £35,985 payment in lieu of notice, and pension strain costs of £250,466.80. Now, look, this set of accounts calls into question the integrity of the leader. I'm going to go back to my Nolan's principles.
No, no, you're not. No, Councillor Webb, you're not going to go back to the integrity of the leader. That is not relevant to this agenda item.
Fine, I've said my piece.
Councillor Fisher. You're on mute. Oh, and we've lost you.
Sorry, I do apologise.
Councillor Fisher? No, we seem to have lost.
I apologise. I'm
There
having
you are.
difficulty unmuting. I have a very rebellious mouse. I do apologise, Councillor Lomas. I thought I'd unmuted myself earlier. I was muttering to myself, and I do apologise. I hadn't muted myself, which I thought I had. Whatever the contents and whatever the auditor's view, and we wait to see that on the exit package, it doesn't alter the fact that those amounts have been paid, and that's what's relevant in the accounts section. So I am absolutely clear that I think we should approve these accounts because they are materially accurate, and that is all that matters as far as the statement of accounts is concerned.
Yeah, I'm just going to clarify with Debbie and Janie. The accounts aren't just the figures; they also incorporate the annual governance statement, do they not?
Yeah. Yes, they do, and
yes,
the audits and the auditor's report.
And the auditor's report. Whilst the numbers may not change, there may be changes in respect of, and again, I'm just asking to clarify, may there be changes to the governance report and the auditor's report?
I think we'd have to ask Mazars whether they would make any changes.
I asked them to stay.
The audit completion report, the annual governance statement, as we said earlier, is a live document, so we will keep that up to date throughout anyway. That will be whenever we get to the point of you being willing to sign them off, the annual governance statement will be whatever it is at that point, and will include any known issues and any other things that might arise over the coming weeks.
Thank you. So I'm going to go to Mark Kirkham before I go to you, Councillor Lomas, if that's okay. Could your audit report change in the light of the second report that you're preparing?
I don't see that report changing. The audit completion report, the auditor's report within it, I haven't heard anything tonight or seen anything that would lead me to change the content of the auditor's report and the qualification of the value for money conclusion. Councillor Webb makes a very good question. He pinpointed the issue for the committee, and that's having had the regularity of certain entries in the accounts and disclosures impugned by the external auditor, do you now feel comfortable to sign off those accounts? And it's understandable why you might want more information about why your external auditors think there are regularity issues. But you should also bear in mind that in our audit completion report, I've said that we don't see the numbers changing. And while there are regularity issues, we're able to proceed with the opinion as drafted. It could be that you've got a different regularity threshold as the people signing off the prepared accounts, but from an audit perspective, I'm satisfied that the regularity issues and the remaining inquiries that we've got won't lead to a different auditor's report. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. It does. And Councillor, now there's a really bad echo coming. Can anybody else hear that, or is that just on my system? Oh, it's just me then. Councillor Lomas, I can hear you, but there's I've got some extraneous noise.
Thank you, Chair. I asked this question genuinely on we've talked a bit about page 145 of our packs, which is page 82 of the statement of accounts. The second paragraph on that page lists the sort of the items that make up the exit package. Are we content hearing what we've heard this evening, that each of those is labelled correctly? So I think Councillor Webb listed them earlier. So are we clear that the £24,884.37 was redundancy payment, that the £65,779.06 was an ex gratia payment, that the £35,985 was payment in lieu of notice, and then that there were £250,466.80 worth of pension strain costs? Are we clear that those are all correctly labelled in that as they appear in that list? Because that appears to me to be something that has come into question quite a lot by the auditors, and not having seen their final report, in which they hopefully will clarify some of this. I haven't heard enough evidence this evening to persuade me that that is all correct in its labelling, not in the numbers.
It is all correct. I suppose the only slight amendment that I would make, knowing now what I know now, is that the £24,884.37, I would call that equivalent to redundancy payment. Slightly pedantic wording, but I would just slightly amend that wording to say an amount equivalent to redundancy.
So we've got a motion to defer the signing off of the accounts, and we're going to put that to the vote unless there are any other raised hands, and I'm not seeing any other raised hands. And the motion to defer was proposed by Councillor Webb, seconded by Councillor Lomas. I'm going to ask members, rather than doing a named vote, to just do a hand vote, and we'll make an assessment from that. All those in favour of deferring this report until we have further information following the Mazars. I'm putting words into your mouth, Councillor Webb, but I'm guessing this is where you were going with this. Until after the second Mazars report has been considered. All those in favour of that, please raise their hands. All those against? So that motion to defer falls. Therefore, we may as well do the formal vote for signing off the chair. Councillor Lomas, sorry, I'm used to calling you chair, Councillor Lomas.
That's in a different meeting.
Yeah, it's a different world. Yes, yes.
Just before we move to the vote on that, I would like it noted that Debbie has herself said that there is an amendment she would make to the statement of accounts, and we'd previously discussed also another amendment in that section. So I'd like to be clear what people are voting for, notwithstanding my position remains that we should not be making this decision this evening. But I think it's important that if there is a vote and members vote to accept it, that we are clear that it is not as it is presented in our packs, that there are amendments to be made.
Totally understood. Totally understood. Councillor Fisher has raised his hand.
Thank you. I was going to just suggest that we do incorporate the amendment to the the equivalent to redundancy, as Debbie has suggested. And you mentioned the other
was that adding an S to corporate restructures?
Yes, that's right. Yes, corporate restructures, fine, because clearly there was a process started. Then there was a decision made when the new administration took over to change again and proceed with a different one. So it is two separate processes, and I see no issue with putting that in the accounts. So
and I don't think we have to have a second, because that was the proposal that was made to us originally. So with those amendments as raised by Councillors Lomas and agreed to by Councillor Fisher, can I ask all those in favour of signing off the accounts this evening to raise their hands? Those against? So that's passed. The accounts will therefore be signed off with those qualifications, Debbie, with those corrections and amendments, to be signed off by me either electronically or at a time when I can physically become available for them. So thank you, colleagues. We now move to the final agenda item, which is the work plan. Now, have you all seen the agenda supplement to the work plan that was put on public record a couple of days ago? Or are you working to the version that's in our delivered packs? Because I can go through them if people haven't seen the new version. Could anybody just make any suggestions? Right. Are you happy with the new version? Yes. Right. So I'm going to hand it over to Debbie and Janie to introduce this agenda item, and if you could make reference to the additions and changes to the work plan. Anybody?
I think
Debbie.
Janie. Yeah, I think Janie's going
Sorry,
to do this one.
I think we're just. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just a bit behind everybody.
It's all right. I've been behind everybody all evening.
Oh, so just working on the revised work plan. I do apologise that I don't know what happens with a glitch in the system, but the correct version, which is the supplemental one, was sent to Democratic Services, but it's just, I just don't know what happened, so I can only apologise. So there is, and the supplement one should show that there is an additional item that comes to the 14th of April, which is, as the public participant indicated right at the beginning of this meeting, we'll look at is the retrospective review of settlement agreements, and I think that is following previous decisions, so that is in there, so that's coming. Also just want to clarify that having had conversations with the chair and vice chair, they're aiming for a discussion about the constitution on the 28th of April.
Yeah, yes you did.
Yeah.
And that's now in the work plan. I think it said in the original version to be confirmed, but we have confirmed it as the 28th of April. And do you just want to explain why it has to be during April? Jane.
The constitution.
Yes.
Yes, the constitution is because we're aiming for a full council meeting. However, there has, as I think all members will now be aware, changed to government guidance on meetings. So as of 1 minute past midnight on the 7th of May 2021, there is a return to face-to-face physical meetings, but that is subject to significant compliance with government guidance, public health guidance, etc. So I'm having to do a lot of work at the moment to try and plan for what a face-to-face meeting looks like. So I'm unable to state with any confidence at the moment a date for full council where it will be presented to.
Thank you. Yeah, and if I'm just allowed to make a comment, it's absolutely ridiculous decision by government to, whilst Parliament, whilst Westminster is allowed to retain remote meetings until the 21st of June, that councils are being made to return to remote meetings on the 7th of May. And I certainly think that will be a democratic deficit for a significant number of members of elected members of this council. But I see Tony, Councillor Fisher has got his hand raised, so I'll move to you, Councillor Fisher. You know, you're on mute still. This is the watch.
Sorry, my rebellious little mouse. I'll echo what you said. I think that it's going to introduce a significant democratic deficit. In fact, it's going to disenfranchise some elected members of this council who will not be able to attend it. I have the same issues with my parish council, where I could actually have a meeting that could be non-quorated for the people who have health issues don't attend. So it's a ludicrous decision. But the substantive point I was going to make is, obviously, this committee technically reports direct to council. Will having that meeting on the 28th, will there be time to actually consult around the different political groups, or to convene some working party to look at this, to consult the executive? Will there be time to do that before the first meetings? I think it's very important that others have insight into what the constitution reviews are and have the chance to pass comment on them.
Janie. Did you catch that, Janie?
Okay, I'm not quite sure. I heard. I'm not quite sure. I heard everything.
Basically, Councillor Fisher was just. Can you hear me?
I think it's about time frames.
Yes.
Yes, I can now.
Yes. Basically, Councillor Fisher.
Is it about time frames? I think.
Yeah. Just, is there going to be enough time from the 28th to whenever full council annual council takes place, for there to be full consultation with groups and other stakeholders in respect to the constitution?
So if we have physical meetings on the 27th of May for annual council, that is with a very strict quoracy attendance because of the venue that could be available. So I don't think it's in the democratic interests of the city or of all councillors to have the constitution at a meeting where a full council is at minimum quoracy. Minimum quoracy for full council, as per the current constitution, is 12 members instead of 47. So it may be that we could utilise the 28th of April as a first look at a draft of the constitution, and then plan for a future full council meeting when we've got a bit of clearer guidance on the position versus remote meetings versus physical meetings.
Can I just ask you, Janie, is there anything legally that would allow us to hold another annual council, given that constitution changes can only be made at an annual council? Could we hold another annual council later on in the year?
So constitutional changes can be made at any full council meeting.
Right.
It's just that annual council is the kickstart of the municipal year. So if there were fundamental changes recommended in the constitution, such as scrutiny, I think all members are aware, has changed in how it's delivered during the pandemic. It may be that if we went to a mid-year full council, there would be a change of process potentially mid-year. Terms of reference of committees, for example, may change mid-year. So it's just about a timing issue, but I think the annual council with just 12 members present would be difficult to do any form of council business. I don't think it would be fair, in my professional opinion.
No, neither do I. Right, thank you. just also would like to add, oh, sorry, Councillor Lomas, you've raised your hand.
I just have another question on the updated work plan, if that's okay. We've just been told this evening that there will be a further report from Mazars in relation to the audit. So will that be slotted in as and when it's available? Can we have some confirmation that that'll come to the Audit and Governance Committee as soon as it's available and not be put off?
Just ahead of you got in just ahead of me, Councillor Lomas. Yes, I've made it clear to myself and Councillor Fisher, as chair and vice chair, have made it absolutely clear to the statutory officers that as soon as the Mazars report is submitted, that whilst we need to get in discussions with the tech team about when the first available date will be, that it will be within 7 days of being able to be published. So as soon as the second report is in, I intend to hold a meeting at the very first opportunity thereafter. And both the monitoring officer and the section 151 were in agreement with that. I don't think I'm putting words into your mouth, am I? Nope. So I'm hopeful that if we need to have another meeting in April, and I'm not second guessing when Mazars are going to complete their report, but if we have to have a third meeting in April, then we will have a third meeting in April. And it will be a single agenda item meeting. Is that okay, Councillor Lomas? Yeah. Fine. Well, this was just for note. I don't think anybody's got any changes. We are going to look at key corporate risks. The work plan, as I think Debbie alluded to in respect to the annual governance statement, is a live and movable feast, and will be subject to additions and amendments as we go along. But it will be on the agenda of every A&G moving forward, which it hasn't been in the past. So, but I'm pleased it's there this evening. Cool. Anybody got anything else that they want to say or comment on? Councillor Webb.
Just to say thank you, Chair. It wasn't an easy meeting, but I thought you did a very good job. Thank you.
Oh, that's kind of you. Thank you. I'm now going to go and have a lie down.
Me too.
Yeah. So there is no urgent business, and therefore, with many thanks to everybody, I'd just like to wish you and everybody watching a good rest of the evening. And I think the football has started, so I'll leave you to it. Thank you very much indeed. Take care, everybody. From the line.